This is Rudy Giuliani, and we're back again. And on my last show, the Rudy Giuliani Show, which is featured on Frank Speech Network, but is also here on X, which you really should watch in tandem with this show because we try and maybe go into more detail once we've introduced a subject, and then we don't like to repeat completely, but we do. We really covered the difference in a reaction in 2016 and 2020. Particularly among Americans in general, we didn't have particularly in the blue states, all the children being treated like little sissy babies that needed to go into safe rooms and oh my God. But that was being orchestrated by what we found, or most Americans found during the pandemic, was the abusive teachers union, abusive and Marxist teachers union, to make sure that Donald Trump didn't succeed or didn't take over the hearts and minds of these children, because then they wouldn't be able to brainwash them into being little Marxists, which they do a very good job of. And it's something that now, with this wonderful election, this election of restoration and reformation, we will be able to change. But that general reaction among the public did not occur this time. But they tried hard to do it. Columbia closed the school so that the little babies could, I don't know what they do when they close it. They probably go shoplifting or something. The Democrat politicians, however, were one little baby after another, and also no introspection. They're starting to fight with each other now. Chuck Scarborough announced that all Hispanics hate blacks. That could be really interesting. See how that works out when you try to create a coalition of the two. But in any event, it is getting to be positive now, because do we want to just show Joe so everybody here that might not have? I mean, this probably could be one of the most extraordinary statements of why the Democratic Party should be abandoned, name change so they get rid of the stench of slavery, and have a new name with new people, and you can do that quick, and have a real alternative to the Republican Party, which I would like to see, not necessarily as a Republican, but as an American. So, Joe, explain to us why there shouldn't be a Democratic Party. Go ahead.
Really quickly, too. Democrats need to be mature, and they need to be honest. And they need to say, yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Right.
It's misogyny from black men, things we've all been talking about, who do not want a woman leading them. Might be race issues with Hispanics. They don't want a black woman as president of the United States. You know, the Democratic Party, I've always found, when you're sitting around talking, they love to just sort of balkanize everybody into these separate groups and say, oh, white people don't like women and black people. No, it is time for the Democrats to say, okay, and you and I have talked about this before, a lot of Hispanic voters have problems with black candidates.
Right.
A lot
and
of,
with other Hispanics. You've got some that don't like each other. And some of the most misogynist things I've heard going on this Get Out the Vote tour came from black men. I mean, misogynist things. So you're absolutely right. It's not simplistic. And we've got to have real honest conversations about it.
Well, the guy who could lead an honest conversation, of course, would be the poor man's Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton. Now, there's a guy with a hell of a career. Gee, Al, where's Tawana Brawley? Now, I have an extraordinary amount of knowledge about that charlatan's career. I think I know him from the time he's about 16. He'd never done anything decent in his entire life. And Reverend Giuliani, Reverend Goodman. You're as much of a reverend as he is. He never went to a seminary. I got more seminary and religious training than he did. Never had a church. No church would take him. He would steal all the money from the church. Burn down his building when the day before the IRS went there with a subpoena. Oh, it happened by accident. You burn down a building, you can kill people, but He didn't care. And now he's that. Maybe that's the reason why people are abandoning the Democrat Party. You know how many Al Sharptons there are in the Democratic Party? Did you ever wonder why, after billions or trillions of dollars have been spent on inner city America, in some cases it's worse than ever? It's because the people who run inner city America, people who run it as a feudal dictatorship, steal the money. You know why New York has more than twice the budget of Florida, even though New York is smaller? Because they steal more money in New York than in Florida. That Do you know why they extended the pandemic emergency so they could steal more money? And I mean, no doubt about it. And the teachers so that they didn't have to work, which they don't like to do. Now, don't tell me about the good teachers. Just like don't tell me about people who participate in making an organization abusive to children. If you're a good teacher, you'd quit the damn thing and make it go away. And the time has come to quit the teachers union. But in any event, this is the attitude. This is the attitude they have, and there were some, and I'm sorry we didn't pull those out too. We'll do it over the weekend, and maybe over the weekend we'll get a few that come on and try to seek lessons from this. I mean, both parties in my lifetime have been devastated by elections. The Republican Party, obviously, right after Watergate. And I may know that the best because that ended up being the reason for my first job in Washington. I was hired by Attorney General Levy and Deputy Attorney General Tyler as a Associate Attorney General in order to help with the Watergate reforms. One of the things I helped create was the FISA court, which you now all know about. And also many of the rules that were created in the Justice Department to take it out of politics, which of course have all been completely trampled, starting with Eric Holder and Barack Obama, and taken to the point of something more similar to Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia by Biden, who's now being, I don't know, stop getting sympathetic about the crook, huh? And really a guy more crooked than Holder, Garland. And that department has to be changed immediately. You can't exist very long as a country with a two-tier justice system where you're putting innocent people in jail because of their political affiliations, their political beliefs, or the fact that they're Catholics who go to Latin Mass, or Catholics or evangelicals who protest against killing children, which they have a right to do. And you're putting them in jail just for protesting, not hitting somebody, not hurting somebody, for which they should go to jail, but for protesting. Just like behind the exaggeration and hysteria you created on January 6th, of course you prosecuted some people that needed to be prosecuted or hit cops or whatever. You put an awful lot of people in jail, didn't do a damn thing. And you put them in horrible jails as if you were a dictatorship. I mean, you treated these American citizens worse than the people in Guantanamo. Their conditions of confinement were substantially worse than the people in Guantanamo, including the people that came to my city and killed all those Americans in Pennsylvania and in Washington. They were treated much better in Guantanamo than American citizens who, some of whom lost control, most of whom didn't, many of whom were invited into the Capitol, and many of whom never even now went into the Capitol. You just needed to prosecute them in a court that disgraced itself, the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, with judges giving bloodthirsty sentences. All of that's got to be reviewed, like the Japanese internment was reviewed, so we never do it again. That should never happen to my enemies, political enemies. I wouldn't let that happen to my political enemies. When we had a chance to do it to the Democrats in 2017 and could have prosecuted many of them, Donald Trump didn't prosecute any of them. Might have been too much not to prosecute any of them, but he certainly didn't do that. Well, he made his first appointment today, and quite appropriately, it was chief of staff. I mean, that's the person that's at the center of everything, and it was Susie Wiles. Susie, I know very, very well, way back from the 2016 campaign when she ran the state of Florida, both the winning primary, which helped get him the nomination, and the surprise victory against Crooked Hillary. And no one expected him to win Florida. We were looking at exit polls the other day, and he was down like 4 or 5% in Florida on the day of the election. Now, he won it close. He won it again 4 years. He won it again 4 years later, but in defeat. And he won pretty much a landslide this time. And Susie, as well as Donald Trump, of course, and DeSantis and Scott and Rubio. I mean, they've got a hell of a lot of good people. Have really turned Florida into now a solid red state, and a state that I'm a citizen of and enormously impressed with. And I'm somebody that's enormously critical of governing because I did it myself and tried to be a perfectionist, which you can't be. But I always thought if I tried to be a perfectionist, we'd do okay. And I had several around me who were, like my good friend, dearly departed Dennison Young, who would come into every morning meeting and point out the places where there was garbage left on the street and make sure that our sanitation department went and got it. Or if there were homeless people on the street, our police department went and helped them. And all of my administration was empowered to do that. And this is an extraordinarily well-governed state. And it does it on less than half the amount of money that New York uses to run one of the most corrupt cities and states in the country. It's a tragedy, and it's the difference between the modern-day Democrat and the modern-day Republican. It might not be true 100 years from now. The parties change, but they got to change themselves. And the first reaction from the leadership of the Democrat Party was extremely disappointing. It wasn't even attacking us. It was attacking themselves. Good luck to Susie. If Susie is anywhere near the clutch player her father was, we'll be in great shape. Now, her father was a hero of mine. And I bet most of you do not know who her father was, but her father was a football player for the New York Football Giants. And you are watching him make what at the time was possibly the longest kick in football history. The really interesting part of it was a kick in, I don't know if it was in overtime or it was right near the end of the game against the Cleveland Browns to go into the championship. And it was somewhere beyond 55 yards. That's not the kick there. That's him kicking in general. Pat was an end, really built like a tight end. But in those days, you see how big he was, right? That's number 88, Pat Summerall. He was a very good end for the Giants. But as he got older, he was such a good kicker. He replaced a Giant kicker who was a great kicker and turned out to be as good or better and kicked on the Giant championship teams. Now, when I say championship, I mean division champions. And they consistently beat the Cleveland Browns for the Eastern Division title. And they consistently lost to the Green Bay Packers. I say it very low because Ted will take great. There's him scoring a touchdown and there's him doing a tackle. Remember, in those days, it's nothing like now. You know, the era where kids go to school for 4 hours and teachers teach for 3. This guy played end on offense and on defense. You see, he's a big guy, right? And he kicked one of the most famous field goals in the history of football to win the championship, to send the Giants on. And he did it on I should point out the really great thing about it was he did it on that's him practicing that day.
That looks like a Yankee logo.
Because they played at Yankee Stadium. He kicked that at Yankee Stadium.
But their jackets, they used to have the same logo. Look at the logo.
100%. But they played at Yankee Stadium.
And they play at the same stadium, but they got the same logo on their jersey, on their jacket.
At that time, they were a dominant team. I mean, they won the 1956 NFL championship, something like 56-7 against the Chicago Bears. And the greatest game ever played was in 50 against the Baltimore Colts.
The 1958 NFL championship game.
But this game was a little later.
Yankee Stadium.
The game I'm talking about where he kicked the
Here it is, 10-10. Giants. Could this be it?
That's it, my friend. 10-10 Giants and the Browns.
Build confidence, I guess. I said they told me to kick
field where
so he said,
they
"You're
couldn't
kidding."
figure out
no.
the yard mark.
It's cold, it's dark, it's wet, and the ball is 49 yards out. Summerall kicks. It's good. The season's longest field goal. The Giants pummeled
Originally called as a 57-yard field goal.
Lombardi
Then
grabbed me
readjusted
and
to
hugged me.
59.
Vince Lombardi was coaching that team. Not the head coach.
Vince Lombardi, this is the last year that Vince Lombardi coached that team. Vince Lombardi was I don't remember if he was the defensive or offensive coach, but he was one of the two, and Tom Landry was the other. Now,
Lombardi was defensive coordinator.
Any of you take a look at it.
Because Tom Landry, right, was famous for.
Yeah, but I know that. But I do think it might have been switched because I think Lombardi is the one who made Frank Gifford.
You're right. Offensive.
Made Frank Gifford.
You're right.
How do I know that? I know that because
no sports.
The option pass is invented by Vince Lombardi or made famous by Vince Lombardi. So it was really born of necessity. Both Frank Gifford and the Golden Boy from the Packers. Who's the Golden Boy? Let's see how good you are.
From the Packers, Don Hudson?
No.
Don't wait. The Golden Bart Starr.
From Notre Dame.
Don Hudson. Not Don Hudson, not Bart Starr. Don't tell me.
He's one of their greatest players. He's in the Hall of Fame.
Jim Taylor.
He was in the same backfield as Jim Taylor. He was the halfback. Jim Taylor was the
How am I not getting this? It's obviously I'm like
I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean come on. How am I not getting that right now?
He was a quarterback in college.
He
was a Heisman Trophy quarterback in college. What do I have to do? Give you his name?
Yeah.
Want to show a picture? Paul Hornung.
Oh, Paul Hornung. I thought Paul Hornung was before. He was way before those guys. I thought. Oh, I'm embarrassing myself now. I'm a huge Packer fan,
and I know more.
Paul Hornung is like a top 5 Packer. You're absolutely right, and I knew it was going to be
the top 20 football players.
You're absolutely right. I'm very disappointed I got that wrong. I'm embarrassed.
He came out of college.
How do I miss Paul Hornung?
He was the
Heisman
Trophy winner for Notre Dame. One of Notre Dame's greatest quarterbacks, which is a hell of a thing because they've had great quarterbacks.
Number 5.
He was called the Golden Boy because he was blonde and very handsome, and he was a great passer. He also could run like hell. Now, go back a few years. Lombardi is the offensive coach of the Giants, and they get a player also very famous, also in the Hall of Fame, called Frank Gifford. Frank Gifford, I think, was from USC, or maybe not UCLA. I think he was USC. But he was a great quarterback also, except neither one of them were as good as Lombardi thought they should be to be an NFL quarterback. He thought they'd be better runners. So he put him at halfback, starting with Frank. And he had Charlie Connolly at quarterback, who was from the University of Alabama. And he turned him into an option halfback. So maybe 25% of the times the pass would be thrown by Hornung. So when Hornung went back to pass, right?
Yeah.
Or when Hornung went back to run, or Gifford, it could be a touchdown pass. So they don't use that anymore because they don't have geniuses like Lombardi. None of them, they'd be too scripted to do that kind of thing. But there's Yankee Stadium. You're looking at pictures. That's the Green Bay Packers. They had a great rivalry. The Giants would perennially play the Cleveland Browns in the Eastern Division playoff. The Packers would play and beat everybody in the Western Division. Often it would be the Bears. The Bears were very good then. And then they'd end up playing at Yankee Stadium or in Green Bay, usually in frozen conditions.
In Green Bay, yeah.
And and you should know they had very close games. I mean, you guys beat us every time, but it was never by, I'm not even sure, a touchdown, usually by a field goal. And they squared off beautifully against each other. Well, we're going to be right back. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how life has materially changed for the reign of terror. And that is good news. That is really, really good news. Obviously, the oppressed people of Iran, but it's good news for the world because Iran is the key to peace in the Middle East. And if we unlock that key, then all the things we hope could happen in the Middle East have a chance of happening. We'll be right back.
Here we are, pretty much at the beginning of the process here at this pristine, I call it a laboratory. It's not like a factory, it's like a hospital. This is the beginning of the process for roasting. Deep grain, very good quality. Most people don't use this quality. We deal with small farmers because they like to know who we're dealing with. They give us the highest quality, all organic, non-GMO. You should know all Arabica beans, no Robusto, all Arabica. They're going to go into the roaster and it'll get roasted for about 20 minutes or so. Oh my goodness, look at these. My goodness. You're going to want to specially order these. This is what goes into Rudy's coffee.
I'll be right back. No, I'm not signing off. I am right back. This is Rudy Giuliani, and you're watching America's Mayor Live, and you're watching one of my good friends and favorite guests. And I have him on because there's a lot of news today, Ali Reza, about Iran in several respects. One is the president, and it's probably his first real announcement of any action that he's going to take with regard to foreign policy. And he's right out of the box, he's made it clear maximum sanctions for Iran, which he did in 17, and even before he put his own sanctions on, he enforced the sanctions that Obama wasn't enforcing, and Iran started to suffer within months. I remember. I mean, it had an impact within months, and their economy is not terribly good. It should be. They're getting a lot of money, but what are they doing? Using it for? They're probably spending a fortune on Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis. That costs a lot of money, doesn't it?
Oh, it certainly does cost a lot of money, and
that as close as possible.
And certainly, the maximum pressure policy that President Trump in his first term pursued was very effective because it basically brought the oil revenue of the Iran regime, which is 80% of all the revenue of the Iran regime comes from the oil and gas. So the revenue in 2018, before the maximum pressure policy was imposed, the regime was making $65 billion of oil revenue, and once they
per year,
and then the Trump administration pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, imposed all the sanctions, adopted the maximum pressure policy. Within a year or two, that went way down to, in 2020, the revenue went down from 65 billion to 16 billion. That's like,
how many
drops in 2 years, in less than 2 years.
It went from 65 billion
to 16 billion.
And the 65 billion had to be their biggest industry, right?
80% of all the revenue comes from oil.
So
that's huge.
We're not talking about a diversified economy. We're talking about
absolutely. It's
about a great economy, but built on one thing.
Built on one thing, exactly. And of course that's huge because much of that revenue actually goes to these proxy groups that you mentioned. From Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Shia militias in Iraq, you name it, the whole region.
So the three major ones that we know about, because they're big names, are we have a map up there, Ted, we can show them. We can show them on the map where these groups are that they support. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. So the Houthis are all the way down there, right?
Right, in
All the
Yemen.
way down in Yemen. See where
Right,
those red circles?
exactly.
That's
And the
where
Red
Houthis are.
Sea,
Now, why are the Houthis aligned with them? Explain to people why the Houthis are aligned.
well,
Learn a little about
yes.
what they're going to really need to know, because I think Trump is going to really take this. This could become a big issue.
Well, the Houthis actually, about 2 decades ago, you never heard about them. They pretty much non-existent, and they were nurtured and basically the way what they are today is basically the creator of the Iran regime. The heads of the Houthis went to Iran about 30 years ago and trained in Qum theological schools, and then they started just building first something that modeled after the Hezbollah in Lebanon within the political system of Yemen. And then when the time
Are they
came,
Shia?
they're a version of Shia,
So-
not exactly
So
like
they
that.
and are perennial adversaries to Saudi Arabia.
Yes, but most importantly, the Iran regime had a vested interest in them because they could use them as leverage in the region. The whole strategy of the Iran regime is built for their survival is built on two pillars: repression inside Iran and export of terrorism outside of Iran. Now, to export terrorism outside of Iran, you need proxies. And that's why, like Hezbollah in Lebanon did the job for them, and the Houthis were meant to play that role in Yemen. And the reason Yemen is significant because that's where you can affect the Red Sea.
Well,
And the Red
if you
Sea is
look at the
where,
map that
yes,
we have there, you'll see it's at the entrance, the southern entrance to the Red Sea.
exactly.
It's going to take you up to the most famous canal in the world.
Right, exactly. And it affects the whole shipping industry. If you're somehow able to block that or affect the shipping, it will change everything in terms of economy. And, it was not an accident that you saw the Houthis targeting the commercial ships in the Red Sea. That affects the prices of even food in California because the ships had to go around instead of going through the Red Sea.
This has had a massive impact on California.
Absolutely.
I mean, they have carried out, and I'm way under because I think of the attacks that affected Americans. It's about 120 attacks that affected Americans, probably about 300 in general.
Yes,
And
exactly.
they've taken out all kinds of commercial vessels. And then they've done occasional attacks on us in Syria and in Lebanon, where they've attacked American facilities and they've killed Americans. And our response has been feckless, Clinton-like bombing of empty fields, which all it does is make the Ayatollahs convinced that we're easy to push around.
Exactly.
So the Houthis are one. The second group that's ancient relationship, a strong relationship, is Hezbollah, which would be in Lebanon.
In Lebanon. And
Right?
Hezbollah,
Here.
absolutely exactly where you marked it. Hezbollah is absolutely crucial because there's no other group that actually can match their status. It's entirely basically created and built by the Iran regime, funded by them, trained by them. And
So this is post-revolution, Hezbollah and Houthis.
yes,
Although the Houthis
the
helped
Houthis are more recent, but the Hezbollah dates back to in the early 80s
Mhm.
and late 70s, early 80s, and and the regime used Hezbollah even for their targets in Syria. Much of the fighting to keep Assad in power was carried out by Hezbollah on behalf of Tehran. And the Houthis, even though a lot of them were trained in Iran, but some of those trainings took place in Lebanon by Hezbollah for Iran, on behalf of Iran for the Houthis. So the Hezbollah played it.
One of the ways they do the dirty work for
Absolutely.
Iran,
Yes.
so that if there are big casualties that are taken, as Hamas, we'll get to Hamas in a minute, but Hamas and Hezbollah have had big casualties from Israel. They don't lose any manpower.
Exactly.
But it still costs a tremendous amount of money.
That's the a huge amount of resources, money, and all of that. All of them taken away from the people of Iran. And obviously,
So-
why would the regime do that? Because they're built on that. I mean, the regime is built on terrorism. And if
The third group we should mention, I think people know, is here. That's in Gaza, and that's Hamas. Now, that's a much more recent relationship, right? In terms
obviously,
of
Hamas is obviously a more recent one, but obviously the regime, opposes peace in the Middle East, and any group, anyone who can help their agenda to target Israel, because the Iran regime doesn't recognize Israel, doesn't recognize, never recognize UN Security Council Resolution 242, and always,
which is what? Tell them what that is.
which basically called for the recognition of some kind of like a two-state solution, recognizing the some
legitimacy for the state of Israel
for them, and it was accepted by the Palestinians way back in 30 plus years ago, and that was a big red line for the regime. The entire policy of the regime externally is built on the opposition to Israel, and the whole Quds force, which is the force that is built to carry out terrorism, is named Quds. In the Friday prayers every year, every week, every Friday, there are three slogans that are being chanted from the microphone at the end of the Friday prayers.
There's a public prayer.
Prayer.
Would it be?
It's a state-run, prayer.
Would it be in every city or just in Toronto?
No, all over the country. There are several hundred Friday prayers. Some of them are small, but the major one, of course, is in Tehran. And from the official podium, they're chanting three slogans: "Death to America," "Death to Israel," and "Death to the MEK," which is the organized opposition inside the country. So they cannot, move away from that. That has become a central element in their foreign policy.
Americans, beyond just politics, have to question how did President Obama give billions, some in cash, to a country and a regime that every Friday chants "Death to Americans." And at the time, Soleimani, who was his big henchman, right, was alive, and Soleimani killed plenty of Americans, particularly in Iraq.
Actually, Qasem Soleimani, he was, the terror master. He was the top commander of the Quds force that does nothing but terrorism. And because the foreign policy of the regime is built on terrorism, in effect, Qasem Soleimani was the actual foreign minister, because the language the regime spoke with the outside world was through terrorism. And the top spokesperson was actually Qasem Soleimani, not Jawad Zarif, not other people who officially they put as foreign ministers. And that's why when Qasem Soleimani,
Trump took him out,
right,
he was considered untouchable, right?
Absolutely.
They always felt if they touched Soleimani, it would engage the regime, and the regime would rain down terrible war on the Middle East.
Actually, that's an important word you use, untouchable, because that's the perception that Qasem Soleimani had created about him, about the regime,
And
about the whole force, the Ayatollah, the whole regime. And when President Trump chose to take out Qasem Soleimani, that shattered this aura of invincibility of the regime in the region. And that, I think, in fact, was the beginning of the going down south in terms of the authority of the regime in the region. They were never back to where they were before.
Mhm.
And all of the defeats that they're receiving when it comes to Hezbollah, the Houthis, and others, that they're being shattered, they're being targeted, it all actually started with Qasem Soleimani. And that's why it was so significant for the regime, and they were so hostile and revengeful when it comes to President Trump.
Now, if he imposes starting in January something like, and probably they're going to be more onerous. One of the points made in the Wall Street Journal is very, very true. I'll tell you what it is. And I have a little experience in my life of this. It says Trump's approach to Iran is likely to be colored by the knowledge that its agents tried to assassinate him and former top national security aides after they left office. Iran is believed to be seeking revenge for the 2020 drone strike that killed Qasem Soleimani. People tend to take that stuff personally, said Mick Mulroy, a top Pentagon official. If he's going to be hawkish in any particular country, a designated major adversary would be Iran. It would be personal. I know that, and you know it because you've been the subject of threats and attempts and stuff like that. It does. It either makes you do one or two things. You either retire or you get tougher. And he has certainly not retired.
Definitely.
I remember. I remember that after the IRA attempted to kill Margaret Thatcher, she became completely obsessively involved in getting IRA killers extradited from the US. And I got involved in one of those cases and did the extradition. And at the request of President Reagan. It is rumored that President Reagan promised her the return. I think his name was Donahue or something or other, of this particular guy because he killed a policeman. But the real reason was that they almost killed her. They bombed the floor below her or above her. And the president needed British air bases to attack, probably in Syria. And she made him promise that he would fix the extradition because a federal judge in New York had ruled that the IRA killer shouldn't be returned because he should be given asylum. And he made me argue the case in the Court of Appeals to get it reversed, and he was sent off to I don't know if they executed him or put him in prison, whatever. But it did cost me a big portion of the Irish vote when I ran for mayor, which has since disappeared. But I'm the only recipient of the Margaret Thatcher Medal. She started the process of giving medals like Ronald Reagan. And in fact, she already had a medal designee for the next year because I was going to go. And then she became afflicted by Alzheimer's like her friend Reagan, which was a shame. But it does tend to make you very focused. It can't escape him that they're trying to kill him.
Well, actually, I think
And I guess there was a plot
absolutely
revealed by the Justice Department, by our crooked Attorney General after the election, right? Because God forbid they would announce it before the election, it might help them. Instead, what they do before the election is put out their report of all the crimes that they think he believes that he committed. Several of those by Jack Smith, which is totally unethical, if not illegal, and disgusting, one-sided view of a criminal case. But they don't put out this arrest, which they could have done a week ago.
Well, the big difference now with 2020, when Qasem Soleimani was taken out, is that this regime in Tehran is not the same situation. They're much, much weaker now. Actually, Qasem Soleimani, right after that COVID came, if you recall, for about 2 years, that COVID basically bought some life for the Iran regime. Otherwise, things would have been much worse for the Ayatollahs. Now the uprisings started to come back in Iran. The regime has received tremendous blows in the region. That aura of invincibility is long gone, and the regime is in big trouble. And I think now is the time to basically fill the gap of the maximum pressure policy that was so effective during the Trump administration, but it still had that missing factor, as Secretary Pompeo said, that it had the missing factor of lack of support for the organized opposition. Because at the end of the day, you want these pressures to lead into something.
The expression in America would be, you can't beat someone without someone.
Exactly.
I mean, you can beat down a politician and show how terrible he is, but to beat a Biden or a Harris, you need a Trump. You just can't beat Biden or Harris, no matter how bad they were. But you need somebody to do it. Well, the same thing is true with a regime. And in fact, we've had so much bad situations where we didn't have an alternative. Because sometimes we made matters worse. Now, that would be impossible in Iran, but maybe not. We've actually overthrown governments and gotten worse governments.
Right.
The best ideal situation is when you have a pretty well organized transition to a lawful democratic government, which I think it's going to be easier to do this. People will think about Iraq. Iran is a much more, in many ways, a much more stable country that's operating under oppression than Iraq. It seems to me.
Well, that's a great.
You know it than I do.
Yes, great example you mentioned, Mayor. The case of Iraq. there were no alternatives in the case of Iraq, and even worse than that, the Iranian regime was just standing in wings, right, undermining, and they just jumped in to fill the vacuum. And their agenda for years was to the whole Iran-Iraq war that started from 80 to 1988 was to liberate Jerusalem via Karbala, meaning dominating Iraq and then expanding it in the whole region. Tehran had that agenda, and once the U.S. invaded Iraq, that basically gave Iraq in a silver platter to the Iranian regime. And but in the case of Iran itself, the regime itself is the epicenter of terror and instability. The head of the snake of war and terror lies in Tehran. And so when the people of Iran have demonstrated since 2018, there have been 9 major rounds of uprisings in Iran. And when I talk about uprising, I'm not talking about just a region or a certain group of people. All the 31 provinces of Iran were scenes of protest, and you had different sectors of the society, from the intellectuals to workers to poor people.
If these sanctions are imposed and they're similar to the sanctions that were in existence and substantially changed by Biden and Harris, how long will it take for them to have the kind of impact? So we have Iran where we had them in 20, which is basically without any money to do these things.
When the new administration came to power here in the United States in 2021, basically, the revenue from $16 billion went up to $37 billion for the regime in 2021. And then in 2022, it went up to $53 billion. And in 2023, it was up to $54 billion.
So it was almost back to the 65.
Almost back to that point. And thanks to Congress, because in this period, Congress had imposed a lot of other sanctions on the Iranian regime, would make it a lot more difficult for the regime to operate the way they were operating before 2018. And so usually it takes roughly about a year or less than a year to really dry down the resources of the regime. And if you really do it in an effective way, it could be really just a matter of months. But the most important thing is that
this is happened pretty quickly
very quickly
in 2017.
Yes, absolutely. And so that's why I think, given the circumstances inside the country, given the fact that there is an organized opposition inside the country, the maximum pressure policy, if that's coupled with recognizing the right of the people of Iran to stand up and change the regime, there's no need for the U.S. to do anything to get involved directly. No one is talking about boots on the ground or the Iraqi style, invasion. None of those things are required. Not even appropriating money. Not a single dollar of the U.S. is actually needed to be invested there. The people are already involved, and there is an already organized resistance that is just basically looking for the opportunity. And all they need is that don't help the regime. Don't give the mullahs the money and the resources to sustain. Don't help their proxies, because the proxies are actually helping keep the regime.
Before we break, and I always wondered about this, and you'd be the one to answer this. Does America provide, in one way or another, by lifting sanctions and releasing seized money, do we provide more revenue to Iran than any other country? I don't mean trade revenue, I mean help.
Absolutely.
Because does anybody else help Iran? Just give them money?
Well, of course,
Russia and China a little bit.
They are, China buys the oil
they produce money for them by a trade with them.
Right.
But I'm talking about, we actually just give, the way we give poor countries money, we give them money, or we let them have money that we could hold back from them. Is that the biggest source of?
I think, the biggest source of revenue for the Iran regime, not just economic revenue or the dollars they get for that, just the whole message it sends.
Right.
When you have the people in the street calling for the fall of the regime,
right,
and you have a U.S. administration just constantly trying to send message to the regime that we're not looking for regime change. We want to recognize your existence. and then
They're giving
giving them legitimacy. You don't want to do that. You don't want to legitimize the regime.
You're giving killers millions and billions of dollars.
Absolutely.
And half of it turns around to killing people.
You want to hold them accountable because the regime has never paid the price for all of these terrorism they have done. The State Department has righteously for several decades designated the regime as a world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. But where is the accountability? Where did the regime
of course
pay the price for it?
Yeah.
And, well, the way they did it is that they take hostages and they get money for it. And then they take a few more hostages and get more money.
We're going to have to go, but I need you to tell me how serious was this plot to kill Trump, and will they try to do it?
I think they will definitely continue to do that unless they see a major pushback. They want to see if the United States is frightened, is going to be affected by that. You want to come back tougher than before. You want to come back and hold them accountable for every terror plot they have done in the past or they're plotting now. The regime has to feel that there is accountability. There is a price for their terror plots, not being, frightening others or getting money in return.
Excellent. Well, no one has done more to bring about change with regard to the people of Iran. And when it happens, you'll be one of the great heroes.
Thank you so much.
God bless.
Appreciate it.
We will be right back after a commercial break.
We're having the biggest sale ever on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save 60% on our Goose Down comforters, the best comforters ever. They go perfectly with our MyPillow bed sheets and duvet covers. Save 25% on our brand new kitchen towels. They're made with the same technology as our famous My Towels. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. Our seasonal flannel sheets are finally in. You save up to 50% and they sell out fast every year, so order now. They're truly the best flannel sheets you'll ever sleep on. Or save up to 80% on all our clearance items. And this is where it gets even better. For a limited time, your entire order ships absolutely free. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use that promo code to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. And for a limited time, your order ships absolutely free.
Rudy Giuliani back again on America's Mayor Live. As you can see, the Trump regime, the Trump administration, it's the Biden regime and the Trump administration. The Trump administration is already having an impact on Iran, but even of more direct importance, because this will take effect over a period of time and be devastating for Iran. You can see Hamas talking now about making concessions for a ceasefire. You can see Hezbollah doing that. You also can see Israel starting to do what it wants to do. They got rid of the general that seemed to be the quizzling with the Biden administration, selling out Israel to the Biden administration. Because if you haven't figured out that Harris and Biden sold out the Israeli administration and the Israelis and the Jewish people, you're really not a very smart person. All of that talk constantly about, oh, it was terrible, but you better not really hurt anybody in Gaza. It wasn't killing civilians. That's crazy. The Israelis killed less civilians than most armies do, considerably more than the American British Army ever did. And nobody takes the precautions to stop the killing of civilians than the Israelis do. And of course, Hamas exacerbates it by putting the civilians right out front. So if you can't defend the people of Israel unless you, despite your best efforts, kill civilians. Otherwise, you're not going to get the people who are dedicated to wiping you off the face of the earth. And for us to give credence to that thought and theory of the warped press is, it's tantamount to destroying the state of Israel. And the Democrat Party has become an enemy of the state of Israel, an enemy of the Jewish people, because it doesn't have the guts to stand up to the substantial number of people in their administration and in high places. I mean, there's a deliberate Iranian spy group right within the State Department, the Defense Department of the White House. Spies. I'm not even sure they're spies. They may be encouraged by the Biden and Obamas. I mean, if we're going to give money to Iran, why not give them information? That's going to stop. And I'm going to tell you why it's so important that stops. That's going to stop because you're not getting peace in the Middle East as long as the regime of terror is there, because peace is inconsistent with their mission. Their mission is to create an Islamic empire. Isn't that their name? The Islamic Republic of Iran? They're not a country based on ethnicity or language or race. They're a country based on a very, very rigid interpretation of a single religion. And they want that to spread. If you look at the map and you see the northern, what I would call the northern part of the Middle East, they already have created, something of a hegemony with Turkey, certainly favoring Iran over the United States and Israel. Syria, usually an enemy, but now under control. Iraq, they control Iraq a lot more than we do, thanks to Biden selling us out when he went there to negotiate the status of forces agreement. And as you know, failed because he failed in everything he ever did in foreign policy, as Secretary Gates told us. And that led to that's just another example of how Biden's corruption and Biden. Oh, by the way, his brother got a part of a $1.5 billion contract in Iraq to build houses when Biden sold us out to Iraq. That led to Iran basically taking over Iraq. Now that's been neutralized a little, but Iran still has tremendous influence over Iraq. Then, of course, you've got Iran. So that's a substantial and who controls Lebanon, but the Hezbollah, which is allied with them. So you've got that empire right there, sitting right there. This is what and their real goal, of course, is the southern part of the Middle East, which is down here. See that word, Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia is, of course, the richest country in the region and a historical enemy of Persia. Iran's name used to be Persia. And they've been at war at each other before there was a Muslim religion. And Saudi Arabia is deathly afraid of Iran because Iran is militarily superior to them, although they are financially superior to Iran. And if they could somehow neutralize Saudi Arabia, that would also bring along Qatar, who seems much too close to Iran than anybody should tolerate. And I worked for the government of Qatar. I did security work, trained their police force for the Asian Games, along with Bernie Kerik. And I'm shocked at how they have become so close to Iran. They are, in fact, Sunnis, not Shia. They are, in fact, cousins of Saudi Arabia. But there's always been a bit of friction with Saudi Arabia between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And they may very well be using Iran as a way of creating distance between them and Saudi Arabia. What should happen if we had a loyal American regime loyal to our principles and our allies, it should be creating a problem for Qatar with the United States. Now, that would shake them up. If they lose the support of the United States, they're going to be delivered completely to Iran. And they may fool around with Iran, but they know what that means. Look at them. Look at that. Look how big they are. Look how big they are. They're not going to work. But we failed to put pressure on them. I mean, think about the fact that there are American hostages now there since October 7 of 2023. Qatar is housing the major billionaire leaders of Hamas who are keeping those hostages. What do you think it's going to take for an American president who's a man? And by man, I don't mean, person of courage, a woman of courage, a loyal American. How much do you think it would take to convince Qatar to get the Hamas to give up the Americans? I could do it. I would know how to do it. I know them well enough to do it. But you just have to give me the authority to do it. I would tell them, forget any trade with the United States. Forget any money from the United States. Forget any visitors from the United States. You know, Qatar Airlines is one of the most beautiful in the world. And also, we're going to sanction you, and we're going to try to stop European countries from coming here. And we're going to try to make you poor. And we're not going to buy your natural gas because we got a hell of a lot of natural gas. And we're going to go energy independent again. In fact, we're going to drill, baby, drill. And you damn right you got plenty of natural gas. But I know you're not even the size of an American state. And we're like 1,000 times bigger than you. And then Qatar will say, well, we'll take away your base. That's one of your most important bases in northern Qatar. Qatar is so small, it doesn't have a north and south, but they like to think they have a northern Qatar. We'll take away your base. Yeah? With what? The police that Giuliani and Kerrick trained? They don't have an army. They're going to come in and take on our 20 or 30 or 40,000 Marines. And gosh almighty, right now, we got half our Navy right there. Once again, I'll erase all these lines and I'll show you the size of this little pipsqueak country. And their friendship with Iran, and I used to really have great affection for them, but their friendship with Iran and their inability to get Americans back has turned me on them completely. Look, I evaluate countries one way. What are you being decent and fair with my citizens? They're not. So screw them. And if we screw them, they're going to really be screwed because I'm going to show you where they are. You see that little pimple right there? That's a little pimple. That little pimple controls the destiny of American citizens who may very well be dead, but their families want their bodies back. And it is close to some kind of accessory to murder. That pressure hasn't been applied to them to get Hamas to release the Americans. It could be done. Qatar has the authority to do it. They allow the murderers sanctuary here, just like our sanctuary cities. We could cut that out tomorrow, but we don't. And I have a feeling we will. So we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Okay, what shall we do next? Delivers on its promise to do good and never forget the sacrifices America's greatest heroes have made for us. Heroes who risked their lives to keep our communities and our country safe. Heroes like United States Marine Corps Captain and pilot John Jeremy Sachs. Captain Sachs sustained fatal injuries when his military aircraft crashed during training, killing him and 5 other service members. He's remembered by loved ones as courageous, brilliant, and devoted to his career, family, and friends. John is survived by his wife, Amber, who gave birth to their second daughter 3 months after his death. Tunnel to Towers paid the mortgage on the family home for Amber and their 2 daughters. The foundation has helped over 1,000 military and first responder families navigate the worst of times by removing the burden of a mortgage payment. Our nation's heroes and their families need your help now more than ever. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at T2T.org. T2T.org. That's T, the number 2T.org. T2T.org. Please donate now.
We're having the biggest sale ever on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save 60% on our goose down comforters, the best comforters ever. They go perfectly with our MyPillow bed sheets and duvet covers. Save 25% on our brand new kitchen towels. They're made with the same technology as our famous My Towels. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. Our seasonal flannel sheets are finally in. You save up to 50% and they sell out fast every year, so order now. They're truly the best flannel sheets you'll ever sleep on. Or save up to 80% on all our clearance items. And this is where it gets even better. For a limited time, your entire order ships absolutely free. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use that promo code to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. And for a limited time, your order ships absolutely free.
We know it has ended. Digital stockades are here. All activity is monitored, stored, and predictively analyzed by a technological cartel. We're being converted into a digital resource, a digital currency to be farmed for metadata and loaded into a computerized combine, blockchained to a social engineering operating system. However, it doesn't have to be this way. Be part of a new technological revolution. Right now, 1,000 test pilots have launched themselves into a new digital frontier, a private network outside of big tech control. New technology with state-of-the-art digital engagement and never-done-before security and privacy features that are now operational. With Quick's digital engagement, entertainment, communication, and commercial exchange will never be the same. We are QUX. Quicks. Advanced pre-release sales are limited to 3,000. Order now by visiting quicks.tv. Get yours now before they sell out.
This is Rudy Giuliani back with you on America's Mayor Live. And we think it's pretty well settled, meaning the races. We know, of course, that Trump has been elected. Today, I was on the air with Joe Hoft, who was involved in the 2020 election, and we shared the experience of not really believing it until 24 hours later, expecting that they were going to put up barricades outside of the counting area in Pennsylvania, because it took a damn long time to count the ballots in Pennsylvania. Doing the same thing in Arizona. But by and large, in the presidential election, we didn't see anything like what we saw in 2020. But we weren't sure it wasn't going to happen until she conceded and we got through the next day. And then we could kind of appreciate what happened. But it looks to me like you got a little bit of deja vu all over again in Arizona. So Ted, can you bring us up to date on that situation between Kerry Lake and a complete, absolute left-wing replica of Bernie Sanders, who has no place getting elected in a place like Arizona? And I'm afraid that some of this, and I am extremely upset about this, and I feel terrible about it, is created by the followers of my good friend, John McCain. And really, not out of ideology or what's good for the United States, but out of personal pique. I mean, this man undermines every policy that anyone who would have admired John McCain would support, except for the fact he might be an annoyance to Donald Trump. But at the same time, he is for open borders. He's for defunding the police. He's a weakling on foreign policy. He's never said or done anything to help the United States military. He's a wasteful spender. He is on the far left of a far left party. I could go on and on. There's no way that anyone that is a Republican or moderately independent can support this guy. He's a lefty of the worst kind. Now, I don't know enough about him to say he's a Marxist the way Tampon Tim is after his training in China, but he sure acts like he's one. And Carrie Lake is a superior candidate. Carrie Lake is an extraordinarily intelligent woman. She's not one of those weak women that is all around Trump, as stupid Mark Cuban said, which of course is ridiculous. I mean, she's one of the examples, really, of the kind of women that are around Donald Trump. She was a great television broadcaster. She's been a great candidate. She's got superior knowledge of foreign policy and domestic policy. She is a strong, principled conservative, and she'll be a great senator. I mean, she'll be one of your outstanding senators, and he'll be just another one of the people leading us and reinforcing our delivery to communism. And why the people of Arizona are making this so close, I don't understand. Except I do know, and people say, well, you shouldn't be bringing up 2020. Well, then go watch another show, because I'm going to bring up 2020 every time I have to, because I don't want it to happen again. Arizona cheated like hell in the 2020 election. And the fact that they've separated the count with the presidential election is enormously suspicious. I received a call from a person that I would say knows the most about what happened in 2020, really happened, not the lies that are perpetrated by the media, and even by other Republicans, the McCain Republicans, whatever. And this person, I will not use a pronoun, this person is very worried and is not involved in the Lake campaign. Is very worried that from what is reported and can be seen, it looks like a typical crooked fix out of Maricopa County, which can be crooked as hell. And they separated out the two elections because they were afraid to do it again in the presidential election, which may be one of the things that all of us who have been crucified by these people have accomplished, which is making them afraid to do it.
Well, there's no,
but they figure Carrie Lake is just an incidental. We can step all over her, and she's been one of the bravest. So where are we right now?
Well, Mayor, and please, someone's got to explain this to us. With only 81% reporting, it is Friday evening, 10 p.m. Eastern, and the state of Arizona still has about a fifth of its ballots to count. But with 81% reporting, Ruben Gallego.
Is it true in the presidential election as well?
Yeah, yes. That's my understanding. Let's check.
Let's look at the presidential election. So the presidential election has what? I didn't see the percentage. It went off very quickly.
I'm bringing it on the screen for everyone. There it is. Okay. There it is. Here we go. Presidential.
So Trump has a 4-5, about a 6-point lead. Remember, this is a state that was won by Biden.
6.3. I wanted the percent. 6.3% lead.
It was won by Biden by what? 11,000, 10,000? Yeah, you don't have to look. It's about 10 or 11,000. I mean, the closest probably a presidential election in Arizona history, and the most crooked as well. So
yeah, 10,000.
And this one is separated by how much right now? The
presidential is separated by 6.3.
So they still have 19% of the vote to count 4 days after the election. Where is this? South Sudan? Is this a result of the fact that we don't teach arithmetic anymore?
Well, every other state at this
So
point.
look,
Why is Arizona?
so don't buy the New York Times bullshit, huh? People cheat in American elections. They've been doing it since the beginning of the Republic. And the Democratic Party is far more expert at it than any other group in this country. They live off it. What the hell do you think created Boss Tweed? They've been stealing elections since we started having elections. They have a larger percentage of crooked people than the Republican Party for historical reasons. And their vote cheating, which is occasional in the Republican Party, is systemic in their party. Largely because they're dominated by crooked big cities. I mean, these cities are a terrible influence on the national party because they run it, and they're out and out complete crooks. New York has been run by Democratic crooks for 2 centuries. Illinois has been run by Democratic crooks for 2 centuries. Philadelphia makes both of them look not too bad. We could go on. Detroit. And Ann Arbor is not much better. It's a capital like Albany. In Albany, the Democrats are the big crooks and the Republicans get the crumbs. I got the impression when I was in Michigan that that's true in Michigan. And, you know, they create the ethos of the party. And the ethos of the party can be, you know, serving the public or becoming a millionaire. Theirs is becoming a millionaire. So don't fool yourself. If they can get away with it, they'll steal. Now, I do think we created such an atmosphere against tremendous opposition. I mean, all of that persecution, all of that lawfare, all of that yelling and screaming and demonizing of people and canceling of people was really intended to shut us up. That's exactly why they put Bannon in jail. But they didn't shut us up. And we ended up with a population, and enough of it, highly attuned to the possibility of cheating, and nothing better than that, boy, to deter it. Nothing better. And it did. I certainly think they cheated in the presidential election, but not anywhere near the numbers they cheated last time. And of course, Trump's victory also helped, meaning the numbers in the victory made it possible to not cheat, made it difficult to cheat. Although some of the individual states were close enough so you could have done it if you didn't have a certain amount of fear. I think Arizona is one, and they decided, well, let's go into let's stay out of the major leagues and let's cheat in the minor leagues and lower on the ticket. And they're also counting on the fact that there are a certain number of Republicans that resent Kerry, the so-called McCain Republicans. They resent Trump too, but there isn't as much as they can do. So they're trying to get their revenge. 2/10 of a point raise. I'm going to tell you the chances that she won that race are about 90%. Because it's impossible, even if they weren't cheating, it would be impossible for them to not cheat for at least 1% of the vote or 0.5% of the vote. I mean, impossible. I mean, they are constitutionally incapable of not cheating in an election. It's like Pavlov, dogs. They just, an election, cheat, election, cheat. Remember all of the illegals in the state of Arizona. So let's look at the numbers again. That state is flooded with illegals. I want to see the raw numbers in Arizona. How much separates them?
Numbers in the Senate race. So let's go to Arizona here. Oh, here it is. We actually have it.
This is a state that Trump is winning by a very, very good number.
I got to bring it up on the screen for our viewers. Sorry. Here it is.
It's less than 40,000 votes, I think.
So right now, of course, it's about 34,000 votes.
Okay.
Ruben Gallego leads Kerry Lake with 81%. Why does it take? Why is there so?
I'm guessing just a logical question. What are the odds that at least one more than 34,000 illegals voted in a state that's been overwhelmed with millions of illegals in the last 4 years, and a party that has gone about registering them illegally and resisted court efforts, a party, not just theirs, but all over the country, and court efforts to get them thrown off, which they resisted. Who in their right mind would resist throwing illegals um, off the registration list? Or wouldn't the only people who did that people who wanted to cheat? Unless you think illegals should be allowed to vote, or anybody should be allowed to vote in America, which means that you will vote America away. If there aren't criteria such as citizenship for voting, you no longer have a country. And it is almost totally ignorant to not realize that that is a stolen election. 36,000, there aren't 36,000 illegals that voted in the state that for a while was bringing in more illegals than Texas because the governor of Texas did something about it. And the governor of Arizona didn't do anything about it. And the governor of Arizona really belongs not in the state mansion, but behind bars for creating a sanctuary state in a state where people are being destroyed by illegal immigration. And why you elected her, I don't know. And I can't imagine in that election that I looked at that election 5 different ways. And that election was clearly stolen, hers. I don't know if she would know how to run an election without stealing. But her and the attorney general are as crooked as they get. The attorney general is tolerating the case. But I do have to tell you, there's a personal interest in this. Those people want to put me in jail for the rest of my life, the people in Arizona. So I figure anybody that wants to put me in jail for the rest of my life when all I did was act like an honest lawyer would easily cheat on an election. And if you tell me they're separated even by 50 or 60,000 votes, I'm going to tell you they cheated. They cheated because you know that a hell of a lot more than 50,000 illegals voted, and they didn't illegally register them to vote for Republicans. The New York Times might think so. And the New York Times, of course, would say that I'm making all this up. But nobody elects the New York Times to anything, thank God. Like I got elected mayor. They never got elected mayor. This is a tragedy. This is a real tragedy what they're doing there. And the fact that we're on a Friday night and they still got 19% of the vote to count and it's the Democratic machine that's counting the vote. The state legislature should just award the seat to the other person on the theory that we don't have to do a recount. We're not dumb. We know who's cheating. That vote assumes that not a single illegal voted in the state of Arizona. I don't care what you want to say, but in a state that has, I mean, some people think they have more illegals than legals. That's not true, but they are, at least up until a short while ago, the major entry point since El Paso was closed down. And for the last year or so, Arizona has been bombarded with illegals. And the Democratic Party has made clear that their goal is to register as many of them as possible. You ask, how do they do it? I'll tell you how they do it in Arizona. I know exactly how they do it in Arizona. And they would never give me the list. They give driver's licenses to illegals. The illegals use the driver's licenses to register. Nobody asks for proof of citizenship. I don't know if they're prohibited from doing it or in the Democratic areas they don't, but they don't ask for proof of citizenship. I'm not even sure they ask for identification, but I mean, the driver's license would be identification, but the driver's license doesn't say illegal. It says driver's license. And they think it's so, gosh, they're a sanctuary city or state, both. Sanctuary cities, which once meant, sanctuary for humanitarian purposes, have now come to mean, well, if you're here, you might as well drive. I don't know if they do what they do in Springfield, Ohio, or in Ohio under Governor DeWitt or DeWhoople, whatever the hell his name is, and they allow people to drive without taking tests because they're illegal. So the Haitians there, that became subject to the eating animal stuff and stuff like that. The real problem there is the city has become bumper cars, and there are a disproportionate number of cars that go up on the street and kill people. because the Haitians, of which there are 20,000 there, have a letter that allows them to drive, and they don't know how to drive. They come out of the jungle where they don't have cars. But they try to drive anyway because it's lots of fun. And they've killed children, they've killed elderly people, and they've created massive numbers of accidents. And they've created chaos. Whether they're eating animals or not is a different story. Now, do you want me to tell you that they're sacrificing domestic animals? Of course they are. It's part of the culture of Haiti. Voodoo is practiced all over Haiti, including among Christians and including among Catholics. The Catholic Church has had to make concessions to have a certain number of voodoo practices in the Mass. You wouldn't get me to do that. But probably the new Pope who comes out of liberation theology allowed it. I mean, he allows the Chinese to name bishops. What a Pope. Oof. The red Chinese name bishops of the Roman Catholic Church. So let's keep an eye on that. This one we shouldn't give up on, Ted. This should be fought like hell. I'm going to tell you,
unacceptable.
I'm glad I looked at that because I don't need to know any more than the fact that it's a spread of 30,000, and knowing how illegals are deliberately registered there, and the fact that the state, when I was representing Trump, and the governor then was a sellout to the people that wanted to defeat Trump. Republican governor was a sellout, Goosey Poosey. I mean, a real traitor. They wouldn't give me the illegal alien list. I wanted to compare the illegal alien list to the list of people that voted. And every expert told me, they gave me numbers that were ridiculously high, which of course I repeated as his lawyer because the experts gave them to me. And for which, I don't know if that's part of my indictment, it was part of my disbarment. That's what I'm supposed to do as his lawyer. I'm supposed to give him the benefit of the doubt. And these all came from experts. And some of them were wild numbers. But here's what you knew for sure. You knew for sure that Arizona cheated. You knew if Arizona had no people who were illegal in the voting numbers and hadn't taken them out, there were a large number of illegals in the voting numbers, and therefore the voting numbers were illegal. And that's the one they passed on to the United States government, which should have been a violation of 18 United States Code 1001, a false statement, a deliberate false statement. Because you got to be absolutely as dumb as Joe Biden if you don't make accommodation and ferret out the illegals from the vote that you submit, and you submit it as if it's a valid vote in Arizona without a single illegal voting, you're submitting a false vote. I think you get the point, right? As we said, Trump has already had a massive impact. Israel seems a lot more intent on getting the war over, which means wiping out Hamas. And when Trump says he'd like to have the war over before he comes into office, what he means is achieving the objective of the war, which Israel could do in 2 weeks if they were not held back by the Biden people. And it looks like getting rid of his defense minister, who was spying on him, to Biden, will get that done. And also, Trump has made it clear that he'd consider supporting Netanyahu in his desire to keep a force there for as long as necessary to make sure that the terrorism doesn't return, which was something that the Biden administration would not support because they really are anti-Jewish and anti-Israel. You can see both Zelensky and Putin starting to talk about some kind of a compromise. If you feel that it is terrible to leave Russians in Ukraine, which I do, I think it's terrible. but I do think the alternative is worse. They are not going to be able to get them out without risking a nuclear war, because to get them out, they're going to have to attack Russia. And they're going to have to attack Russia in such a serious way that Russia wants to withdraw. And I don't want to make the calculation that instead of withdrawing, Putin uses nuclear weapons. And I think a compromise is necessary so that we don't lose lives. Right now, we're losing lives uselessly because the Russians are not going to withdraw, and the Ukrainians are not going to throw them out. They're not going to be able to. And by the way, Biden doesn't allow them to do what they have to do, Ukraine, to get them out. I'm not sure Trump would either. It would require bombing Moscow. I don't know who would support bombing Moscow, but that's how you'd get them out. So now you're in a stalemate, except people continue to die for nothing, for no result. Russia is probably not going to get too much more land, and the Ukrainians aren't going to get them out. They're just using up guns and killing each other. And without any doubt, the crooked oligarchs in their country and in our country are whacking up the money. And don't tell me, we can feel very comfortable, McConnell says, because it's going through the American military industrial complex. That may be the reason we shouldn't be comfortable. Remember, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act was passed because of how they bribed everyone in every part of the world, whether they were enemies or friends. And if they haven't been involved substantially in corruption in the first or second most corrupt country in the world, which Ukraine is, then there's no corruption. And despite the fact that the elite in America want to close their eyes to it, it really is horribly damaging to the lives of Ukrainians, to the national security of the United States, to close your eyes to the fact that Biden is one of the most corrupt people in Ukraine. And every Ukrainian knows it. It's only Americans who doubt it because of our crooked press. Read my book, and you can see at least part of it, called The Biden Crime Family. Let's not elevate this guy to anything other than what he was, a common criminal. Not a common criminal, actually, a terrible, perverted criminal. One of the beneficiaries of this election is Eric Adams. I don't know what Trump is going to do with Eric Adams. I mean, I know Trump is convinced that Eric Adams was seized on because he criticized the Biden administration over illegal immigration. Now, there's a lot to that, and I don't have the time to go through it all now, and you probably know it. But I don't know if Eric Adams did or didn't do the things he's charged with. I don't. And probably only a trial would satisfy me on that. But I do know that he was singled out for prosecution because he criticized. I know it because the governor of my state, Hochul, has done far worse than him criminally. The amounts of money are not comparable that she's taken illegally, and is completely immune from even news stories about it. And he's tortured. I don't agree with him particularly, nor do I think he was a really look. He follows de Blasio, so for that, he's certainly not de Blasio. But he also has a lot of problems as the mayor. But that doesn't mean you can prosecute him. Right? And I wonder, and this is something I've never thought of, but I will, because it's a very interesting question that appeals to pinheads. Should a prosecution of a person that might well be guilty be proper if it's only being done for political purposes? Very interesting question. Very, very interesting question. And I don't think there's a single answer to that. I think it really has to do with the nature of the crime, the danger of the crime, the level of the political interference, which here was 100%, the integrity of the prosecutor, which is here non-existent, the level of proof that you have. The one thing he has in his favor in that analysis is the nature of the crime so far charged is getting upgrades on airline trips. Doesn't strike you as like, Al Capone shooting people in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, right? And Hochul, produced what was it, 300,000 or 300 million? I can't even remember, in illegal contributions to her PAC, and it's clearly a quid pro quo, and it's covered up. And she's done a lot of other things. So that's an interesting one, and we'll have to see how it plays itself out. We'll also have to see who the other appointments are. There's this whole question of the Fed and what's going to happen to them. And the major role that Latinos played in the election of Donald Trump, which looks like it was even bigger than we thought. And if you take out New York and California, where nobody really counts because they're Democrat and we're Republican. So you can have a big Latino vote, a big Italian vote, you can have a big Jewish vote, or you can have a big, what's the difference? The real question is, in the swing states, how did he do with the Latino votes? Wow. Part of why Florida has turned around is the Latino community, which is now very diversified when it was once very heavily Cuban, has followed the example of the Cubans and become Republicans because they've seen the success that the Cubans have had as Republicans. And they've seen that all Democrats do for Latinos is make them wards of the state. So we'll be back next week. We'll enjoy ourselves this weekend. It'll be the first weekend where we don't have nightmares over the future of our country because it's in good hands. We do have nightmares over the next 6 or 7 weeks, however. I have no idea what these animals are going to do during that period of time.
And you want to stay right here, not because the mayor would ever give out any inside information, but this is someone who worked both. Were you on both transitions? Or sorry, not both, but 2016 transition.
Yes.
You know a lot of the key folks around here.
I did my own transition.
You've done your own. You know the
was
president.
involved
How many
in Bush
administrations?
transition.
Yeah. So you just have a lot of knowledge of it. Of course, you would never give anything away, but you definitely can react to some of the news as we hear it, and it'll be real interesting. The president, he's not waiting. He hit the ground running, hasn't he?
He has, but it is going to be a little bit of a longer process because of the way he's constructed it. He's using the classical model now, which really dates back to 1980 and Ronald Reagan, which everybody has copied, including this guy when I became mayor. And that is to put together committees for the important positions, have them make recommendations, and give him more than one recommendation so he can make a choice. That's a much better way to select cabinet members than just off the top of your head. It not only does it weed out problems, it's much better vetting. It gives you a chance to think a little bit about what you want to do with the agency. So this is a much different kind of transition, as you would expect. The difference between a rookie administration that where the only one who expected to win was Trump and me and Bannon. All the rest of them were like, we're going to let a government now. Wow. The press told us we were going to lose by 6%. Because no matter how much they're corrupt, somehow they affect you, right?
Yeah.
You look at the polls and
a little bit, right?
Of course, even me. I mean, you never know. Someday they may. You know what I said about it with discounting at Trump in the polls, right? I said someday it's going to turn out to be right. But look at Arizona. Arizona was a toss-em-up state. He's ahead by 6%, and the best they'd ever do in him winning it was 1%. That's a 5% differential.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
No, he's still under polls.
And how do they get these illegals? Well, we'll talk about it over.
How do you find out who the illegals are?
Yeah.
I'll tell you how you do it. You release the voter roll now, not in March. You go get the list of illegals that we have. You won't get all the illegals because they're not all on a list. But you get the list. You know how we know how many were detained who came in? We have 3 different kinds of illegals, right? We have the ones who were caught and released. Used to be under Trump and honest, legitimate, loyal American presidents caught and detained and thrown out. But these people were caught and released. About 9 million of those.
Yeah.
we have their names. Then you have the people that are gotaways. There we have probably half their names. Means we either had them at one point and they got away, or we observed them and didn't have the time, the effort, or the resources to go get them. So some of them we won't have the names, so we won't catch them. Yeah. And then there are people we never see who come in the vast space between our border stations.
We don't have those names, though.
We have no idea who they are. We have no idea who they are, and we do know by just a matter of logic and instinct that they are the worst, because those are the ones that the cartels make the big money on. Those are the ones who are going to bring in the large amounts of fentanyl, because they don't want to risk being caught at the border. So they'll give the cartel $1 million just to cross a border that they know right now much better than we do, because they control it. And they make their fortune off it. They may take part of the fentanyl trade. They may be the actual ones who are selling the fentanyl, because the Mexican cartels have become a massive organized crime group within the United States. They're represented in every major city. So at least we have the names. I mean, want to guess? You probably have the names of about half the illegals in Arizona. A good chance you're going to, it's 30,000 votes. A good chance you're going to find 50, 60, 70.
They don't cover their names or anything. They just vote.
No, they vote. Yeah, you won't get the ones who cover their names. I'm happy to get the ones that went in with their driver's license. And
there's at least there's a good number for that.
There's a good at 30,000.
You got to check that.
Man, you're in great shape.
Yeah.
If you told me she was behind by 150, 200, it might still be possible. Could be that high, but I wouldn't be sure of it. Mm-hmm. At anything below 50,000, I'm sure of it.
Okay.
And please just exercise your own private logic here, because this is what they try to deprive you of. Here's a state where more illegals came in than anywhere else, than possibly Texas. And in the latter stages, more than Texas. The reason the Democrat Party brings them in part, is to register voters. 20 to 27% of them have been registered throughout the country. What are the chances that not a single one was registered in Arizona? Because that's what those numbers purport to say. They haven't taken a single vote out for an illegal. They haven't gone to look. And what are the chances that the number exceeds 30,000? 100%. Well, we'll do some analysis of that over the weekend. We got a lot of sources in Arizona, one of whom, who I believe knows Arizona better than anyone, shared this with me today. And we'll be back on Monday, and over the weekend, which is supposed to be particularly Sunday dedicated to God. We got a lot to thank him for. He really made a major intervention here, and he made it in a very dramatic way when he saved Donald Trump's life, so that he can save our country. And he's off to an excellent start. And I am still hopeful that the wiser people in the Democrat Party, when these yahoos get out of the way, will start reflecting on what went wrong, what changes do we have to make, and how do we get back to a two-party system where it does require our agreeing on the fundamentals of the American Constitution, which we don't right now. They have trashed, and I can personally tell you, being one of the many victims of it, that they have completely tried to destroy me and destroy my life. They're not. And we'll get to talk about that more. And as an example, because there are people that have been treated worse, people that have been treated not as bad, but I certainly can document for you how they have cheated, lied, altered documents, doctored tapes in ways that are outrageous. And the crooked Democrats have let them get away with it. Well, we'll be back on Monday. Pray for Israel. Pray for Ukraine. Pray for the people of Iran. And pray for the people that are disaffected now, that the wisdom that God granted to a large majority of us, he grants to all of us, to understand that the person running our country isn't a demon. He's a really nice man. He's a good man. And he has done really good things the first time he was president. And if we don't torture him completely, he'll do even greater things. But even if we do, he'll succeed. There's nothing that will stop Donald Trump from succeeding from us. Question is, how much can he succeed? With our cooperation, we could have one of the greatest periods in American history. God bless America.
Bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained, by rational principles, the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the Kingdom of Great Britain and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, for freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the ability to select the people who govern them. And he explained it in ways that were understandable to all the people, not just the elite. Because the desire for freedom is universal. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind, and it is part of the human soul. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done in the past and see if we can't use it to help us now. We understand that our founders created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, the freest country, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any country ever. All of us are so fortunate to be Americans. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk,